Hey guys, welcome to Judincast for Social 10-1, episode 18. We're going to be looking at trade liberalization, and this is our last topic in Unit 3 of the course, which was our focus on economic globalization. So let's get right to it. So trade liberalization. Trade liberalization is quite simply the process of reducing barriers to trade. You are liberating trade. If you look at where the word liberal comes from, it means liberty, to liberate from. So in the context of trade, you are liberating trade from any sort of barriers and obstacles. And if you take a look at this image here, you have country A, country B. Without trade liberalization, you may have barriers to trade. Barriers that prevent this company from doing business freely in this country. That could take the form of tariffs, taxation, uh, government regulation, and interference in the economy, limit on exports and imports, etc. So there's three major ways in which trade could be liberalized, and this is what I'm going to look at here. Number one, deregulation and privatization. Number two, encouraging foreign investment. And number three, the outsourcing of jobs. So these three things are part of trade liberalization. So let's look at the first one here, deregulation and privatization. So the process of privatization involves the opening of an industry to more competition by removing government regulations. Sorry, I read that backwards. This is deregulation. So deregulation is the opening the industry to more competition by removing government regulations in the economy. So this is a major topic in grade 12, but in any sort of an economy, and especially in modern economies, we have what's called a mixed economy. That, yes, we have capitalism, we have private enterprise, but we also have the government setting a number of rules, regulations, and it's ultimately interfering in the economy. So when you deregulate, you remove, it's the process of removing regulations to promote competition. Privatization is just the selling off of industries to private businesses. So this happens in Canada when we privatize crown corporations, which are government-owned companies. And some examples of this are Air Canada, used to be government-owned, Petro Canada, Ontario Hydro, CN Rail, etc. These used to be government-owned, and then they were privatized. So this is a part of trade liberalization. You're getting the government out of the economy by deregulating it and privatizing as much as you can possibly in society. Number two, major part of trade liberalization is foreign investment in Canada. So foreign companies own Canadian companies, right? I think we mentioned in the course before that Tim Hortons, of course, a famous Canadian company, is not Canadian owned. It is owned by some multinational Brazilian conglomerate, even Molson Canadian, right, which really loves to play off Canadian nationalism. Molson Canadian is foreign owned. It's owned by this massive, I believe it's a Belgian corporation. In Canada, we have Esso, right? But that's owned by the broader international, transnational corporation of ExxonMobil. In the 1960s and 70s, Canadian governments were very worried about this foreign investment. They saw that this is a potential way we're going to lose our domestic industry, and there's concerns with it, of course. But generally today, the Canadian government actively seeks foreign investment. They see it as a way to inject money into the Canadian economy to kind of stimulate the economy. And there's ultimately no restrictions for how foreign companies spend their profits made in Canada. So if they make $10 billion, they don't necessarily have to re-spend it in Canada. So that's a potential downside, that companies may be making profits in Canada, and generally are, but they don't have to necessarily spend that money in Canada. So if you take a look at countries that receive the most investment from abroad, China, of course, has a lot of foreign investment. Why does China have so much foreign investment? Because, of course, they manufacture a lot of things for various corporations around the world, due to, as we talked about earlier, a lot of stuff's outsourced there because of cheap labor costs. Canada, not too bad for foreign investment, but there's certainly other countries that are higher up for foreign investment. A lot of our oil sands are owned by foreign companies. I shouldn't say owned, but uh, foreign companies play a big role in the extraction of Canadian oil sands oil. And third, in terms of trade liberalization, so we looked at deregulation, privatization, we looked at foreign investment. Now let's look at outsourcing, which we've talked about, so it won't take long. This is a concern many people have with trade liberalization, that when we liberalize trade, that means there's no limits on outsourcing. If a company wants to move part of its business from Canada, for example, to Singapore, there's nothing that will necessarily stop that. This occurs when one company hires another to fulfill certain tasks in production, such as contractors, subcontractors, etc. It is controversial because if you look at the negatives, well, this can lead to job loss. Jobs may move overseas because companies will outsource part of their production to, say, India, where labor costs are lower, taxation is lower, uh, materials may be lower, etc. Material costs may be lower. So jobs may flee, may lead to higher unemployment, may force people on unemployment insurance because they don't have a job. It can lead to a drop in standard of living. But positive, creates as many jobs as are lost. A lot of people believe that you just get new types of jobs. More free competition equals better for the economy, consumers. So that is a major thing that people will cite when it comes to trade liberalization, is that it promotes free competition, that domestic industries are not necessarily given an advantageous position. They must compete for consumer dollars like everybody else. So, some pros and cons of free trade generally in trade liberalization. Well, most people would identify increases economic growth, lowers government spending because you're privatizing, you're deregulating, you're getting rid of crown corporations. Can lead to technology transfer between countries because it's not only money that's exchanged, right? Ideas are exchanged. Negatives, well, jobs could be outsourced, could lead to poor working conditions, as companies, obviously, when they outsource, they're looking for, uh, they're considering labor costs when they move overseas. So with low labor costs could come poor working conditions, and it also involves the degradation of natural resources. If you are deregulating the economy, that means the government is not setting as many rules and regulations in the economy. One potential offshoot of that is the businesses are more free to degrade the environment because there may not necessarily be the rules in place to stop that. So that's it for this Judincast on trade liberalization. Take care, guys.